Over the past few months, there have been a few headlines indicating that the government could be considering the abolition or reform of inheritance tax. Importantly, though, nobody represented the government has made any on-the-record comment on the future of inheritance tax, and certainly not on any hard plans for its removal from the statute books. Inheritance tax has also been conspicuously absent from any recent commentary on Labour's taxation plans. Yes, the Shadow Chancellor has stated that Labour will be looking to reform the rules on non-dom taxation, which would almost certainly include some aspect of inheritance tax reform. And she's also said that they would not introduce a wealth tax, but nothing directly has been set out on inheritance tax. Inheritance tax was only relevant for around 4% of estates in 2020-21, a proportion which the Institute for Fiscal Studies projects will rise to around 7% by 2032-33, which of course in around 10 years' time. Given that limited impact, it seems unlikely that abolition or even reform would be anywhere near the top of the to-do list for the Labour Party. And for both parties, there's the inescapable fact that while inheritance tax is currently generating only around 7.5 billion per annum, it's still 7.5 billion that would have to be found somewhere else by a financially responsible government were the tax to be abolished. The state of the public finances and the growing demands on public services leave really no real alternative. Ahead of the election, self-evidently, only the Conservatives could abolish the tax. Stands to reason, right? Superficially, this might look like a vote winner. And that is what the newspapers were reporting recently, as the tax regularly polls as the most hated of all the personal taxes. However, the potential beneficiaries of abolition may well be those who would vote for the Conservatives anyway, and there will be the negative press surrounding giving up 7.5 billion of revenue to benefit such a small and probably comparatively wealthy part of the overall population. The current Chancellor has also been relatively vocal about public finances and the need to act responsibly, meaning that now is not the time to be considering tax cuts. So the current autumn statement rumours suggest its focus will be on generating growth and implementing spending efficiencies without returning to Lord Cameron's austerity. So whoever wins the election next year, in the near term, in my opinion, abolition looks highly unlikely. It may, however, be a long-term aspiration of the Conservatives. So how about reform? Well, plenty has been said, and many suggestions made, it has to be said, about potential reform over the last 5 or 6 years. In 2019 and 20 alone, there were 3 lots of suggestions for inheritance tax reform. In brief, they came from, and here we go. Number 1, the Office of Tax Simplification, the OTS, a Treasury construct but no longer in existence. What did they say? They said, well, apart from some common sense administrative reforms that they put forward, the 2 OTS reports in November 2020 and July 2021 contain nothing too radical. Notable proposals, however, included the reduction of the 7-year accumulation period to 5 years, the abolition of taper relief, moving to a single consolidated annual gift exemption, and scrapping tax-free CGT revaluation on debt. None of these non-administrative reforms were adopted by or progressed by the Chancellor at that time, one Rishi Sunak. Next, the All-Party Parliamentary Group for Inheritance and Intergenerational Fairness, the APPGIIF, also no longer in existence. They reported in January 2020. They suggested introducing a single annual gift exemption of £30,000, abolishing normal expenditure out of income relief, retaining the nil rate ban, abolishing business and agricultural relief, and dropping the inheritance tax rate to 10 to 20%. None of these suggestions were adopted either. So next, the Institute for Public Policy Research, the IPPR, which does still exist. In a report published in September 2019, the IPPR proposed a single lifetime cumulative gift allowance of £125,000. All capital receipts from transfers made during lifetime or on death taxed on the donee. This is important, taxed on the donee as income. Effectively, the introduction of an income tax-based donee basis of taxation. The Resolution Foundation, interestingly, I think, has also recently made similar proposals. Common theme here, none of these suggestions were adopted either. Next, the Institute for Fiscal Studies, the IFS, and most recently, of course, in September this year, they published a report proposing a few things. Business relief capped or abolished, agricultural property relief capped or abolished, DC pension funds no longer IHT free, and the residence nil rate band abolished. With these changes, though, the good side of the changes, the business relief change on a capped as opposed to a fully abolished basis, the IFS projected that to remain revenue neutral, in other words, no drop to the IHT yield for the Treasury, you could afford either to increase the nil rate band to 525,000 from its current 325,000, so £200,000 up, or reduce the inheritance tax rate to 25%. There's been no official comment so far on these suggestions. So where does this leave us in relation to potential reform as opposed to complete abolition? Well, clearly there's no shortage of suggestions and options that could be considered, and no one should rule out a future fundamental review of and consultation on, because I think that would have to happen, capital taxation reform, including capital gains tax. And that's something that has actually been suggested in the past. It's had some support. However, in the current, basically, given the current list of more urgent and important issues to address, it's difficult to imagine this being anywhere near the top of the tax action agenda of whichever party wins the election. Of course, we may or may not get a little more clarity on respective proposed directions of travel when we see the manifestos, maybe even, at least in relation to longer term aspirations, within the autumn statement or spring budget. We'll see. We are definitely keeping a close eye out.